Then I would like to call to order the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for May 18th, 2020. We're meeting in a virtual format, and I would like to, let's go ahead and if the clerk would just record which counselors are here for the record. And we have Ms. Nosler Beck is here, so. Looks like we're
7 of 8.
Okay, so we're only missing Ms. Dozeman, and I believe she's going to join us in a little bit. So thank you all for joining us. We would like to open our meeting tonight with citizen comment on any agenda item. Our only agenda item this evening is Denver Water lead reduction program. But if there are any members of the public who would like to comment on that item, now is an opportunity to do so, your opportunity to do so. If you would please unmute yourself and speak up. I'll be happy to recognize you, and then we'll give you 3 minutes to speak. So is there anyone in the public who would like to speak on tonight's agenda item? Okay, I don't hear anyone wishing to speak, so we will close our citizen comment on agenda items and go to our agenda item number 1. This is Denver Water Lead Reduction Program. And I know we have some guests from Denver Water here. Mr. Goff, would you like to do the introductions?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have Denver Water here this evening. Janine Shaw, and she has some folks that she'll introduce, but they're here tonight to talk about their lead reduction program.
Thank you very much.
This meeting is being recorded.
And our meeting is being recorded. So good. So anyway, nice to have you with us. If you'd like to go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, and we're really happy to be here talking about this with you tonight. So I'm Janine Shaw, and I'm our local government affairs manager at Denver Water. And presenting tonight, we'll have Alexis Woodrow. She's our lead reduction program manager, and she'll be sharing her screen. She can't do video at the same time, unfortunately. Okay. And we also have Megan Truby, who's our government and community relations manager on, and her and I are mostly here to answer questions if there's anything additional. So okay. I am going to go ahead and kick it on over to Alexis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janine. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present about our lead reduction program. I am going to pull up the screen. Can you all see it?
Not yet, no.
Okay. How about now?
Yep. Oh.
Good?
There you go.
Good.
Great. Okay, so I'll continue. So today, on our agenda for today, I'm going to give a brief overview about Denver Water, because we're a lot more than just Denver for Denver Water. I'll provide an overview of the lead reduction program, provide you a list of resources on Denver Water's website and contact information as well, and then open it up for questions. So Denver Water, we are the oldest water utility in the state, founded in 1918. We are governed by a five-person board of water commissioners, and it's governed independently from the city and county of Denver. Our water supply comes from mountain snowpack, which is why it's so tasty. And we serve 1.5 million people with roughly 2% of water used in the state. And we are actually the 3rd largest landowner in the state. So fun fact for that too. So as I mentioned, we serve 1.5 million people treated water in the Denver metro area. For context, the city and county of Denver is roughly about half that population. So we serve a lot of the surrounding suburbs for the metro area. And so we have infrastructure projects such as North System Renewal that connect into Wheat Ridge and the surrounding suburbs. So this is a little bit of a zoom into our service area. So you can see the red line is the boundary of our service area. Actually, outside of that red boundary, we also have raw water contracts. But for Wheat Ridge, we serve treated water via master meter distributor. And what are distributors? So we provide service for many of the surrounding counties within the city and county of Denver. It's about 63 different contracts that we refer to as distributors. And those 63 contracts are all rolled into our integrated service area. So we've got 3 different contract types. We've got read and bill, master meter, and total service. And there's a variety of different types of services that go along with the type of distributor. So for a total service, just like it sounds, they are provided billing as well as treated water and other services within Denver Water's utility, such as infrastructure updates. Read and bill distributors are ones that receive their bill from Denver Water, but the infrastructure is managed by by that distributor. And then master meter, where we're providing treated water, but once it gets on the other side of that meter, that wholesale distributor ends up providing the billing and infrastructure maintenance. And so for Wheat Ridge, it's 3 different master meter distributors that provide water to your city. So this is a very extended timeline about lead in drinking water. But first and foremost, I think everybody can acknowledge the fact that lead is bad. It's bad for human health. And what we find is in the first half of the 20th century, lead was very prevalent and used in a lot of different types of products, such as gasoline, paint, and in plumbing supplies, particularly water service lines. So water service lines are the pipes that connect from the water mains in the street into people's homes. And prior to 1950 in Denver Water Service area, they were very likely to be made of lead. It was used as the industry standard. It's a soft malleable metal, so it was very prevalent. It was also used in other types of plumbing sources, such as lead solder, which connects copper piping inside the home, as well as brass fittings. Up until 2014, brass fittings could contain up to 8% lead. So in the first half of this 20th century, you see lead being used as an industry standard. And then in the latter half, you see a lot of regulations, not just for lead in drinking water, but lead in gasoline, lead in paint. But it wasn't until 1986 that lead pipes were banned federally. And in 1992, the lead and copper rules was established under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the lead and copper rule is a little bit of a unique regulatory law in the sense that it requires water utilities such as Denver Water to test homes within its service area for both lead and copper releasing in their plumbing. So even though the water that Denver Water sends to their customers doesn't contain lead, lead is prevalent in older homes, older fixtures within the house. And so we test those levels. In addition to that, the lead and copper rule requires something called corrosion control treatment, which is a bit of a mouthful, but what it means is that we treat our water to minimize metals such as copper and lead from leaching or entering into the drinking water. And since 1994, we've adjusted our pH as our corrosion control treatment. So we were conducting testing, we were using corrosion control treatment in the form of pH adjustment, and it was working fairly well until about 2012. And that was when we exceeded the action level set by the EPA. And what that means is that under the 90th percentile of our homes that we tested, it was above the threshold set by the EPA, which is 15 parts per billion. So Denver Water conducted a massive public education campaign about the exceedance and conducted pretty extensive studying on what would have caused this exceedance. And what it was determined is that the pH, as we said it, was not considered optimal. So we went through a series of studies and it culminated in a paper that we provided to CDPHE, looking at 2 different types of treatment methods. One was elevating pH, and the other was orthophosphate. These are both tried and true corrosion controlled treatment techniques. But we actually said that even though orthophosphate performed better, Denver Water had some concerns about the long-term nutrient loading and downstream impacts. Nonetheless, following the letter of the law, the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment designated orthophosphate as the optimal corrosion control treatment technique. This concerned many of our watershed, wastewater, and environmental stakeholders. So we actually engaged in an MOU with the state and launched a really extensive stakeholder process where we did further research. And one of the outcomes of that research is the offering of a potential variance, a variance from the order of orthophosphate. And so that variance, and we'll get into a little bit more detail, is the lead reduction program. And what we viewed it as, Denver Water viewed it as a multi-tiered, multifaceted approach to being proactive at removing lead at its source and protecting all customers from lead exposure, as well as protecting the environment. We went through a public input process through the fall of 2019. And submitted a final approval for EPA in September of 2019. EPA reviewed it and approved it in December, on December 16th of 2019, with an effective date to start the lead reduction program January 1st. So we've been pretty much hitting the ground running ever since. And so we have a video for you to watch, and I will play.
Hey, Alexis, I don't think we can hear the sound of the video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have to share your device sound or audio.
All right, hold on. Let me try this one more time. I need to share my device.
Audio.
Okay. Sorry, it keeps playing over and over again. Let me. All right, I'm not seeing how to share audio. Sorry. Apologies for that.
Okay, just 1 second. Hey, Jesse Johnson, this is Allie. Are you able to help provide any guidance on how to share audio? Don't know if Jesse's able to hear me. Okay, thank you.
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, we're in Chambers. I don't think we can help them. I think that's on the PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you.
We could go
Okay.
to the actual YouTube link. It might play from there.
Let me try that.
Jesse, you sound like you're actually in a chamber.
Yeah, that's the feedback in Chambers.
All right. Bear with me, folks.
And if we need to and we're not able to share the video,
We'll just, I think, share it afterward.
sorry about that.
That may be something that if you could get our staff, that if she could I'm sure we could send that around to our counselors. They could view it on their own
Great.
devices.
All right, apologies for that.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Should have
so much.
troubleshooted that one before. All right. Okay, we're gonna just move on. Can you see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Apologies for that.
No problem at all. That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so, well, I'll just talk. I don't have as good of a voiceover as Jay does on the video, but there are 5 major elements to our lead reduction program. The first is corrosion control treatment, clearly the most important. And as part of the variance order and the lead reduction program, the corrosion control treatment is pH adjustment. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about what that is. The next step is the lead service line inventory. As I mentioned before, there's different sources of lead in plumbing, but lead service lines are a major contributor to lead in drinking water. And that the reason being is that the pipe itself is made of lead, whereas if you're looking at other sources of lead in plumbing, copper with lead solder, as well as brass fittings, is just a much smaller percentage of lead compared to the service line. So part of our program is to not only maintain an inventory, but to track all of that and post it on our website publicly. And so I'll show you a version of the map that's available on our website. The third element to the lead reduction program is a filter program. So any customer with a known or suspected lead service line within our service area will be provided a picture and filter replacements and be included in the program with educational materials. The fourth component to the program is lead service line replacement. So any service line in our, I'm sorry, someone's raising their hand.
Yeah. Thanks. Sorry.
It's
Mayor.
okay.
Al, go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
If you have a question.
I just had a question. You had talked about the 3 different types of programs that Denver Water services. And so would all 3 of those qualify for these elements?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, so we've got different types of distributors, the master meter, the read and bill, and total service. All of those types of agreements, all of those types of distributors are included in this program.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Service line replacement, that's a core component. It's the proactive approach for the program to remove lead at its source. So we are conducting full replacements of non-copper service lines. So that'd be lead as well as galvanized pipe over a 15-year period. And all of this requires pretty extensive communications, outreach, education, engaging our customers, engaging our public and stakeholders, as well as elected officials to promote understanding about the program and adapt to some of the behavior changes that the program requires. So corrosion control treatment, pH. As I mentioned earlier on that timeline, Denver Water began adjusting their pH to in 1994. And so what this shift is we're adjusting our pH from 7.8 to 8.8. And the purpose of this is raising the pH basically reduces the corrosivity of the water. It creates a coating in the inside of pipes that helps to minimize leaching of different metals from entering the water. So lead, copper, and other metals. So the corrosion control treatment is pH going from 7.8 to 8.8. pH is used as a treatment technique for corrosion control, not just in Colorado, but also around the country and around the world. Several major utilities in the country use a high pH, such as San Francisco uses it, as well as Westminster. So the lead service line inventory, as I mentioned, Denver Water has posted a map on our website that lists out every single known suspected or non-lead service line within our entire service area. And as you can see by that orange outline, it goes well beyond the city and county. It's covering all of our master meter, read and bill, and total service districts as well. We've also partnered with all of our distributors to evaluate these inventories. It's a pretty massive data set. As you're looking at the inventory, there's somewhere between 64 and 84,000 homes in our service area that may have a lead service line. So we've been working very closely with a lot of our distributors to evaluate those data types. And some of the evaluation also would include water quality testing. And in fact, we are sending out approximately about 500 water quality test kits to different residents in Wheat Ridge to help verify whether or not those service lines are made of lead. Next up is the filter program. So we are, anyone with a known or suspected service line, a lead service line is enrolled in Denver Water's lead reduction program, and they receive an education packet in the mail as well as a pitcher and then filter replacements. And so what we do is a direct distribution to our customers. The outside of the box looks like this. And what you can see is that actually all of our materials are translated into Spanish as well. So our materials are bilingual. And so we are rolling this out through the city of Denver and our distributor districts now. We began distribution at the end of March and expect to be done by the end of August. So the majority of filters distributed to our customers will be completed by July, and that's when they would be going out to Wheat Ridge. And so this is what it looks like. It's a Brita Long Last filter, and the pitcher is about a 10-cup pitcher. We have instructions that go into that box that I showed you here. Let me go back. There's instructions as well as other educational materials that go in the box. We also have a video available on our website, it walks you through how to activate the filter, how to change out the cartridge. The filter cartridges last about 6 months, and we'll continue to replace those for all customers enrolled in the program until they either get their service line replaced or we verify that their service line is not lead. And why are we providing those filters? Well, the idea is that filter is the most protective for the customers with known and suspected lead service lines. And they need to use it for drinking, cooking, and preparing infant formula. And so this is a pretty significant behavior change for our customers. It's something that could seem a little bit alarming if you receive a packet of information. Maybe you read it, maybe you don't. But then you receive this picture in the mail from a water utility, it can raise some concerns. So we just want to educate our customers that we're not in a public health crisis. But this filter allows them protection from any lead that's in their water that the pH doesn't help minimize until we can get that service line replaced or verified whether or not they have a lead service line. So that's what the filter program is for. And then the last component to the program, well, the fourth component to the program is the lead service line replacement itself. So it's removing the hardware as the treatment technique. And so again, Denver Water does not own the service line. The water service lines belong to the customer. And that's why we have a pretty broad estimate of about 64 to 84,000 properties that may have lead service lines. And a lot of that information is determined based on the age of the building, the water tap information that we've got, water quality testing, and other types of verification methods have led to that estimate. So even though we don't own the service lines, we're tackling lead at the source and replacing those service lines at no direct cost to the property owner. But because it's 64 to 84,000 lines, it's going to take about 15 years to replace all of them. We also do prioritization of replacement in communities that are the most vulnerable and at risk of lead exposure. And what we do know about lead is that children are most at risk. So we look at demographic information as well as data provided by the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment to help identify those communities and help that with the prioritization. Within Wheat Ridge, we suspect there's about 1,000 to 3,000 lead service lines, which is why one of the first steps that we're doing is sending out those water quality tests to help verify whether or not there's lead. But we estimate between 1,000 and 3,000 homes will be receiving filters and be enrolled in the program by end of July, early August. So communications, outreach, and education, as I mentioned earlier, this is a very, it's a very intensive program. We've had a pretty swift launch of it. And so it's very important for us to raise awareness that customers use water properly. You think about changing your furnace filter. I think a lot of people don't think about proper water usage, that if you have older plumbing in your home, you should run your water on the cold water side for several minutes every morning. We want to make sure that we're engaging with the most at-risk populations, targeting groups, community groups that can help us with those outreach efforts. And the whole idea is that this program we feel is the most proactive and preventative approach to reducing lead at customers' taps. And so then there's another component to this, equity. And so, as I mentioned before, we use a prioritization model to look at the most at-risk areas. We also conducted a language analysis to make sure that we're being able to communicate with all of our customers, not just within the city and county of Denver, but in our entire service area. And then also leverage the relationships with different community groups around the city and around our service area to help communicate with some of those harder to reach people, to make sure that they're using their filters, that they're following the practices we're recommending, and that our educational materials are reaching them in a way that is going to help them make better decisions for their families. And so we have a pretty robust website. We've done several updates to provide information. Customers and everybody on the meeting today can sign up to receive monthly updates on the program. Our customer care reps, representatives have pretty extensive knowledge about the program and can at least direct customers to the right information. And we also have a lead email address, lead@denverwater.org, to for any of your customers, or if anybody has any inquiries. And so that's the program in a nutshell. We'll have to send you the video because it is actually a really nice summary of what the program is. But wanted to open it up for questions.
Well, thank you very much, Alexis, for that presentation. I had a memo from Mr. Goff that he may be able to show us the video.
I will stop sharing then.
Mr. Goff, are you on? And can you make that?
Let me try.
magic happen?
Janine sent it to me. Let's see if it will work from my computer. No guarantees. Huh. Yeah, it's just, let's see, mute. I guess I can't get the audio either.
I
Okay.
wish it was better. I could have narrated it for you, but it'll take a couple of rounds and then maybe I'll get to it.
There we go.
Taking action to help protect current and
Here, let's start over. It's just the first part that doesn't, there's no sound.
There's no audio on those first slides.
Okay.
taking action to help protect current and future generations from lead in drinking water. It's why Denver Water launched its new lead reduction program in 2020. While the water sent to customers is lead-free, lead can get into water if it passes through service lines that are made of lead. This is important because lead in water can have significant health impacts, especially for pregnant women, infants, and young children. Service lines are the pipes that connect Denver Water's water mains in the street to homes and businesses. Service lines belong to the property owner and not Denver Water. As part of the lead reduction program, Denver Water has an estimated 64,000 to 84,000 properties in its service area that have lead service lines. The utility plans to replace these lines with new lead-free copper pipes at no direct cost to the customer. Most of the properties are homes built before 1951. Pipe replacement will take place on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis starting in 2020. It will take 15 years to replace all the lines. Priority will be given to areas with a large number of facilities that serve infants and children, areas with high concentrations of lead service lines, and underserved neighborhoods. Reducing the risk of lead in water at home is another important part of the lead reduction program. That's why Denver Water is sending customers a free pitcher and water filters. The filters are certified to remove lead and should be used for drinking, cooking, and making infant formula or other beverages. While the primary source of lead in drinking water comes from lead service lines in the ground, lead can also get into water through household plumbing that contains lead. This includes faucets and fittings made before 2014, as well as solder that was used to connect copper pipes before 1987. To help protect all customers from these sources of lead in drinking water, Denver Water is increasing the pH level of the water it delivers to its service area. This higher pH will strengthen an existing protective coating inside pipes and plumbing, which reduces the likelihood of lead getting into water. This change will not impact the taste and odor of the water. This comprehensive program was approved by the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. You can learn more about the lead reduction program at denverwater.org/lead or call 303-893-2444.
Oh, thank you very much. That was good. Thanks for putting that together. All right. Well, thank you very much for that presentation. Let me see if we want to open it up for questions from council. Please raise your hand and I'll call on you. Ms. Nosler-Beck, unmute and continue.
Thanks so much for the presentation. I just have some questions about the science behind lead and in water, and you guys probably know the answers. So one, like, can you get lead poisoning from taking a shower? We just talk about drinking water, and I just wanted to know where the, like, if it also is penetratable through your skin.
That's a good question. It is, that is not a risk. Lead contamination can come through ingestion. And so with children, it's the highest risk because their bodies are smaller. Plus, because they're still developing, it can disrupt some of their neurological development and brain development. But for adults, it's also not good, but only if you ingest.
And I think you guys went over kind of some of the, positives and negatives of, like, either the orthophosphate or the pH. But with pH, is it something like the increase in pH and the acidity? I know you guys said that it's tasteless, like it wouldn't change any of that, but does it do anything like to the enamel on your teeth or have any other side effects?
CDPHE has also verified that pH at that level has no health effects. And there are several utilities, and I mentioned San Francisco utilities have been using it, I believe, since the 90s. And so there are no adverse health effects.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Additional questions from council? Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we're not using lead for solder anymore, what are they using?
Oh, that's a good question. A tin, and I'm not sure what the other makeup of, but they also have other types of taping materials that do use the solder. It used to be a 50-50 lead tin solder, but I am actually not a plumbing expert. However, I have seen my husband use a tape and another like tin-based solder.
Oh, okay. Maybe Teflon tape or something like that. I don't know, but
yeah, plumber's tape.
Yeah. Okay. Then I have a question. What about the schools?
That's a great question. So what we have worked to do is try and identify what we call critical customers. So those are those at-risk populations, daycare centers, schools, and even some healthcare facilities. And we're currently doing outreach, not just within the city and county of Denver, but all of our total service to identify any schools that potentially are at risk, and then working to further identify whether or not they have a lead service line. And then if they do, if it is verified, prioritize it for replacement in 2020 and 2021.
Okay, so I know we're already alkaline now and we're going to be more alkaline. Has there been any study like with CSU regarding how this can affect like trees and plants and things like that?
Janine, if you don't mind, because I know you've been doing a lot of the research, do you mind taking this one on?
Sure, not a problem. So Janine Shaw with Denver Water. And what we have found with pH is, I think a lot of people hear an increase in pH and think that is directly the same as the pH in the soil. And while the water pH influences the soil pH, it takes a very, very, very long time. And so there are a century or something like that. So what we have been finding in our discussions with CSU and other water providers who are also at that higher pH level is that it really, as long as you're using best practices, like when you irrigate, you don't want to overwater. You don't want to be doing certain things that will make the impact worse. Or rather have an impact. So when water actually sprays into the air with like a standard sprinkler head, the pH drops back down. So it's an interesting phenomena. Yeah, but
chemistry, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
So we are continuing to look at. There are certain plants or tree species that may have more specific needs. And, when that's the case, there might be, if it's like a prized, I don't know, not a gardener either, that there may have to be adjustments or something with the soil on the other end.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Additional questions? I had a couple. Is the service lines, who would determine whether the service lines are lead or whether they're another type of material? Is that the current water providers, or will the customer be involved with that understanding that piece of information?
That's a great question, Mayor Starker. It's a group effort for sure. So I think I mentioned when we were developing our inventory, we worked with all of the distributors in our service area to look over their own inventories and gather information that they had. In addition to that, we've got the water quality testing. The way that Denver Water provides water tests to customers, it's actually 3 1-liter bottles, and we time the testing to help determine where different locations in the house. So if you've got your first draw water sample, it's going to show really what's in that premise plumbing, what's in that faucet. Your second sample is going to show kind of further down into your plumbing if you've got copper with lead solder and other materials. And then typically between the second and the third sample really does a good evaluation of what the service line material is. So water quality testing is one other way that we're going to do it. A lot of these homes are pre-1950. It might have changed owners, but you might have owners that actually remember changing out their service line over a period of time. And so if they have records of that, we definitely want our customers to share that with them and their distributors. And then lastly, there's other verification methods. So we would do probably an interior inspection of the home. So looking where that water service line comes in. As well as potholing, where you make small excavations above the service line, and then you either do a scope or you do a visual inspection to look at the material. So it's going to definitely be a team effort to make sure what's lead and what's not.
Are you able to determine the type of service line material from a surface scan of any type? You know,
Oh,
when you
that-
go
that
out to
is-
locate utilities, it doesn't, is there anything that would tell you whether it's, you know, copper or lead or zinc or?
So we there has been no above ground detection that's been successful. So you can really detect galvanized because it's magnetic. And so if you have a locator, you'll be able to distinguish between a galvanized pipe versus a copper versus a lead. Unfortunately, you cannot tell the difference between copper and lead, which is totally the goal of this. So the person who can determine above ground detection is going to be a very successful person. So there's a lot of research projects that are trying to figure that out, but no success as of today.
And let me ask one more, and then I think we've got some counselors that also want to ask some questions. You would replace the line, I assume, sort of size for size, and I suppose the meter may or may not be changed at that time. And then one more follow-up to that is, are you typically able to bore these into the house, or do you need to do surface excavation in order to get them in?
Oh, these are great questions. So the first question is, we will replace up to 3/4 inch in size. If that was, you know, so a lot of times the service lines that are, you know, 50, 60 beyond, you know, older, they tend to be actually a little bit smaller than the standard 3/4 inch copper service line. So we'll upgrade to a copper service line. If it's a school or larger facility, we'll actually replace, you know, a 1 inch to a 1 inch. So we'll replace in kind. We'll actually swap out the meter, put in a new meter, as well as all of the fittings and appurtenances in that meter pit. And part of it is because there's that old brass, and so we might as well swap out all of those leaded brass fittings as well. And then you had other one. What was your last question?
Whether you can bore it or whether you do open cuts.
Okay, so that depends on the contractor. We incentivize our contractors to not open excavate. First of all, it's actually really labor intensive and it causes a big mess. So the first step that often contractors do is they try and pull the line. So they connect, you know, a copper with to like a fitting called a bullet, put it on to like an excavator, and they just try and pull the line, the lead line out and the copper line through. If that doesn't work, depending on soil type and the like, they'll actually bore. And Denver Water's crews probably use boring about 50 to 60% of the time because it's the most successful. So we tried not to do open cut excavation. It does not make people happy to see their gardens ripped up.
Thank you. That's, yeah. Appreciate that. Additional questions from council? Just raise your hand and I'll see you. I'm looking hard. Well, that was a very good presentation. I really appreciate that. So what should our citizens expect to see as the sort of the first efforts in this rollout?
So the first wave of things that'll come out to the customers will be water quality test kits, and that's not going to go out to, and I think I said there was an estimated 1,000 to 3,000 that we're going to be communicating with by the end of the summer. So the first thing that they're going to see about this program are water quality test kits. And what's nice about the water quality test kits is it kind of empowers the customer to learn a little bit more. It's an activity that engages them into, hey, let me think about my plumbing a little bit. Haven't really given it much thought. The water quality test will help us kind of fine tune that inventory and refine the numbers. But then, you know, in order to be most cautious, we're going to send anybody with a known or suspected lead service line a filter, and that'll begin in mid-July. That being said, so those are direct communications that are going to go to the customers. But I will tell you that media has picked up on the program itself. And I think part of it is because a reporter actually receives a filter, gets a little bit curious about it, writes a story. So it's also possible that your residents are going to see a news story about it and might ask questions in the meantime. But the direct communications won't come out till about mid-July.
Okay.
Meg, Janine, anything else you wanted to add?
I think that's it from,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. And Ms. Weaver had her hand up.
Thanks so much for your presentation. We have several different water providers here in Wheat Ridge, and this might be a question for Mr. Goff, our city manager, but like I'm on Consolidated Water, and I know that they're also affiliated with Denver Water, and I was just kind of curious for those constituents that aren't on Denver Water directly, will we be contacted? Is this something that other water providers are dealing with? Could you just talk a little bit about that? Because like, I don't get a bill from Denver Water, I get it from Consolidated Water. And I know other people in Wheat Ridge have different providers. So if you could just speak to us about, Mr. Goff, how many different providers do we have in Wheat Ridge? I know of 2, 3.
I think water, we have 6 or 7. Sanitation 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So I don't have the exact number. But.
So what will it look like? Is it one voice coming from Denver Water, or is it going to be coming from each of the entities?
So I don't know, Meg or Janine, if you want to take it on. Or...
Yeah, I'm happy to address that one.
Great,
so
thanks.
So anybody who's in our integrated system, so inside that big red boundary map, is part of the program, whether it's Consolidated Mutual, Valley Water, or Wheat Ridge Water District. We are attempting to have everything co-branded as much as possible. So people understand that, okay, if I am in Wheat Ridge Water District and I'm used to seeing a bill from Wheat Ridge and all of a sudden I'm getting something from Denver Water, what we are doing is first we're explaining, here's who we are and our relationship to your water provider and why you're getting this letter. And then we talk, and then things co-branded as well.
Okay.
So we're trying as much as we can to have a unified voice in partnership with our distributors.
So I'll get a letter just like anyone else would if I'm identified as having an issue.
So one of the interesting things with Consolidated Mutual is part of their system is Denver Water and part of it's not. Yeah. And so it really depends on whether or not you're inside that boundary. So I would encourage you to test out that our address search inventory, and you can actually put in your address and see if it's in there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And will you, when we get questions, where should we direct our residents to call? Who should they call?
Yeah, so they are encouraged to call Denver Water Customer Care. So they're welcome to, a lot of people will just call their water provider. So if it's Wheat Ridge Water District, they might start there.
Sure.
Wheat Ridge Water District may be able to answer some of the questions, but may ultimately refer the person to Denver Water. But we are happy to take those questions directly. So that's the best source. And then also if people are more comfortable with email, it's lead@denverwater.org.
Okay.
Our website is really well built out on the lead reduction program. The FAQs in particular are really helpful. From my experience, one of the first questions we get is, well, do I have a lead service line? And then the second question is, okay, if I do, when is it going to get replaced? And so one of the things that we didn't touch on tonight is our reimbursement program. So as you heard, the program is 15 years long to replace all of the lead service lines. We cannot plan out individual service line replacements that far out. So we are doing it year by year, learning as we're going, trying to coordinate with other projects so there's less disruption. And as our model gets better, figure out where the higher density areas are. So if a customer calls and says, am I on the list? When am I gonna get my service line replaced? If they are not on our 2020 list, our answer is we can't tell you. which is really uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we're about a year out telling people of where they are in the list. So what we are providing is an option for reimbursement of 50% of the cost that we estimate it takes to replace a lead service line. So our estimated cost based on a pilot program that we did where private contractors did the replacements was that it cost about $7,600 to replace a service line. So customers who want to replace the service line on their own, want to hire somebody, get it done sooner, have that option. There's information on our website about that as well, where they would get a 50% reimbursement if they qualify, up to $3,800.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And when you start replacing lines, are they planned to be replaced in certain neighborhoods, so you'll do all in a geographic area? Is that kind of the thought behind that? Or?
Yes, that's correct. So there's efficiencies with having it in a specific geographic area. You get concentrations of lead service lines in older neighborhoods. You're not having your contractors mobilize all of their equipment and things like that, which also has impact on customers. And so we want to reduce customer agony, get in there, focus on a geographic region, and then continue to move on. For 2020, we're focused within the city and county of Denver. And part of the reason is to develop a framework because we work with so many city agencies. You're working with permitting, both interior inspections as well as your street cut permits. It's a lot of logistics. So we're trying to get it all kind of figured out within the city and county of Denver before we approach outside the city in future years for replacements.
And I think the one thing I would add to that as well is that because of COVID-19, there are actually some places that would normally be open and it'd be really difficult to do the replacement because it requires a water outage. So we are actively looking at that critical customer list and trying to get into those places now while they're closed and while they're not occupied. And that's throughout our service area.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just had a question about the shared cost. If it weren't to be a part of the reimbursement program, what is the cost that you guys would cover versus the homeowner?
The lead service line replacements are at no direct cost to the customer. So they get absorbed through our rates.
Okay, and so it would be at least more cost beneficial for the homeowner to wait to have the service done through you as opposed to a reimbursement program?
Yes, if they went through the reimbursement program, they would have to pay, and they would pay the full amount and be reimbursed $3,800 at the end of it once we verified that the service line was replaced. Whereas if they wait sometime within the 15 years, they'll get their service line replaced at no cost to them.
And so after you identify it, I saw that you offer like filters. Is that until they have it replaced, or is it just like a one time you get the bottle and then they have to replace the filters?
No, that's a great question. They any customer who's enrolled in the program will get a pitcher filter as well as the filter replacements until they get their service line replaced and for 6 months afterward. Now, there's going to be some customers that we are providing them filters, and we further down the road verify that they don't have a lead service line, they have a copper service line. At that point in time, they'll be notified that they don't have a copper service line, they're no longer enrolled in the program, and then we will no longer be providing them filters. But if they have a lead service line, they're getting filters until that service line gets replaced.
And just one follow-up as far as that, is there any kind of issue as far as liability with like you guys identifying a potential lead service line and then not replacing it soon, and then there potentially being health issues within a family or household?
I'm not aware of any of the liability issues, but that's one of the reasons why we are providing the filters for drinking and cooking and preparing infant formula, is to offer that protection to those customers until we can get that service line replaced.
And how quickly are you able to identify, like, is there like a backlog of customers with the identification process, or do you move along that pretty quickly?
So with the inventory, we have a list of 64 to 84,000 where it's suspected. Prior to replacement, we conduct investigations such as water quality testing and potholing to verify. And then once they're verified, we just make sure that they're enrolled in the program, that they're receiving the educational materials and the filters. And so if there's a change in ownership, right? So you could have someone sell the house and you have a new owner come in. We have a mechanism through our customer care billing database to make sure that we, with that transfer of service, provide that new homeowner with a pitcher filter and educational materials to make sure that they're protecting themselves. And then the only other thing that I wanted to add is that, you've got that frontline treatment, corrosion control treatment with the pH. So you're protecting customers not only with lead service lines with the pH, it's reducing the lead levels by as much as 50%. You're also reducing the lead levels from that lead solder with copper pipe, as well as those older brass fittings. So the pH is really the overall protection for all of our customers, for the 64 to 84,000 in our service area that have lead service lines. The filters and the lead service line replacements become that preventative measure for them as well.
And so if you're going to be incurring the costs, are we going to be seeing our water rates go up in order to subsidize this program?
Yes, we're still figuring out what the impacts are for 2020 and 2021. We're engaging all of the distributors in those conversations, but there will be impacts to rates, and we're still evaluating how that will look and what the cost allocation will be.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Good questions.
The one thing I would add to that as well is with the inventory being between 64 and 84,000 lead service lines in our service area, we cast a really broad net. And so the number is not going to go up. We're looking to bring it down and hone in from there. So it's not, if there's somebody that's not on our list, we do not expect somebody to then be added to the list. It's going to be taking people off as we find out more.
Additional questions? And I assume this goes not only for your residential customers, but for your commercial customers also?
That's correct. Yes, we and any commercial customers or commercial businesses with lead service lines will also get those replaced.
Thank you.
And we do have Meg Truby here if there are any questions about communication, outreach, education for City of Wheat Ridge residents and businesses. And she's more than happy to provide a little bit more information about what that looks like if folks are interested.
Okay. Well, thank you all. Any more questions from council? Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for a very thorough presentation on this. I'm sure we'll have some questions, but we know where to send them, I hope. But
we're not going anywhere, so yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Ms. Woodward and Ms. Truby for joining us tonight. We appreciate it, and we will hopefully be able to provide our residents with the information that we have, and if we don't, we know where to send them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And look forward to a successful rollout. That's a mouthful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Okay. We will go to item number 2 on our agenda is staff reports, and I'll go to Mr. Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have several this evening, and sent you a couple emails over the weekend with a couple of the updates. I think we'll start with the updates on the hook ramp project. We do have Tyler Carlson with Evergreen. He's on the phone. He's not going to be on video, but he's on the phone to help with any questions. And then Jerry Dahl, I believe, is also on the line. Is that you, Tyler?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you mind staying on mute for a bit? You kind of got some background noise. Thank you. So as my email noted that I sent you last night, I believe, want to give an update on the hook ramp project and the progression of that. And to summarize, and then I'll get into a little bit of the details. We're going to continue the hook ramp project and to get it finished in a timely fashion so that the Clear Creek Crossing project can move forward, we're going to use some of the funds, the bond funds, 2E bond funds that are allocated for the Wheat Ridge, Wheat Ridge Ward TOD station projects to finish this until we get reimbursed with funds from the developer when they issue bonds or the city has additional revenues, depending on how the budget does during COVID here. So a little bit of history. We have quite a few new council members, so some of this was completed and approved. Agreements went into effect several years ago. So as you know, the city issued $33 million in bonds in 2017 for 4 different projects. 10 million of that went to the Hook Ramp project and 12 million went to the Wheat Ridge Ward TOD station projects. The other went to Wadsworth and Anderson Park, the rest of the funding. Right now, we're looking at probably about 17.5 million total projects to complete the Hook Ramp project. When we did the ballot question back in 2016, we put $10 million in for the Hook Ramps, not as a final number that we thought would finish the Hook Ramp project. It was just a good chunk of money that would contribute to the project to help get the project off the ground. We didn't know what the exact number was back then, but we always knew it was going to be more. So it was never intended that the 10 million would complete the whole Hook Ramp project. So we entered into a couple different agreements with the Longs Peak Metropolitan District, which is the district that oversees the Clear Creek Crossing project, and Evergreen Development holds a majority of the seats on that district. So in 2018, we entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the district for the construction of the ramps. In that agreement, it said that the city would use its $10 million bond funds for the construction of the Hook Ramps, but then the city would also pay for everything above 10 million to finish the Hook Ramps. And then whatever it took to finish the Hook Ramps, right now we're estimating that to be about 7.5 million. The city would pay for that up front, but then we would be reimbursed from the Longs Peak Metropolitan District when they issued bonds for the project. As you all know, there's been a lot of changes this year. COVID has thrown a wrench into a lot of different things, and this project is not immune either. We were intending to use general fund reserves and also putting a few other capital projects on hold to be able to cash flow the difference above the 10 million and get the Hook Ramp project done. But as you all know, we are projecting anywhere between 10 and 30% reduction in revenues this year. So using general fund revenues reserves is just not going to work. Also, the Evergreen is still working very quickly and diligently on the project. However, they can't issue bonds until they have numerous tenants signed up and under contract. Maybe I'll let Tyler speak to that when we get to him. So there's a couple different issues there. The city doesn't have the money to pay for the Hook Ramps, and the Evergreen, the developer, and the district doesn't have the capacity necessarily to issue bonds right now to reimburse the city. So we have, and then also we entered into another agreement with the district in 2018, as I mentioned, that they would again reimburse the city for anything over $10 million. So to date, about 10.3 million has been expended on the first 2 phases of the Hook Ramp project. So the off-ramp off I-70 and the on-ramp, the temporary on-ramp, which are ramps A and B, were completed recently. The next phase, phase C, is the permanent on-ramp to get back onto I-70 West, which will be a flyover bridge that goes over 32nd Avenue. So they were about ready to start that piece of the project. We looked at potentially holding off and canceling or postponing that piece of it until we have a better idea of revenues and the developer can get more tenants signed up and potentially issue bonds. We met with CDOT and there was a possibility we could do that. But we are under contracts, or the district is, with Mortensen, who's building the hook ramps. And if we cancel or delay the project, there's about $1.3 million in expenses, demobilization costs, and damages that the city would have to pay above and beyond what the project costs today. So we don't think that's very fiscally prudent when we have money set aside in the bond fund that we can use to pay for this. The only impact, really it's a small impact we believe, is that some of the projects over at the Wheat Ridge Ward Station will be delayed a bit, not too long hopefully, but many of the projects are still moving forward at the Wheat Ridge Ward TOD Station. All the designs will still move forward so that when we do have the money to finish the pedestrian bridge and the trail at the Wheat Ridge Ward Station, it'll be ready to go. There's also some of the road work that will continue, improvements to Ward and Ridge Road, which is a requirement from CDOT. That project will still move forward. So there'll still be work going on at Wheat Ridge Ward, but a good chunk of the money that's set aside we need to use for the hook ramp project. So let's see, I think that's pretty much it of my background on this. We had numerous discussions with our bond counsel and legal, and it is okay. There's nothing wrong with using a portion of the funds that were set aside for the Wheat Ridge Ward Station to finish up the hook ramp project. Actually, our bond counsel says it's the smart thing to do. You should do that. It's not violating any bond ordinances or the ballot question. We're still intending to finish all projects that were promised to voters. It's just that some may get a little bit delayed so that we can finish the hook ramp project. The hook ramp project is going to have really the biggest cost benefit, we believe, at this point for the city, because once the infrastructure is completed, that just enables the developer and the district to get that project finished, get some sales tax generating businesses in there that the city will benefit from. So Mr. Dahl is on the line, as I mentioned, and Tyler Carlson, you can unmute yourself if you like, and we'll take any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions from council. Ms. Hulteen and then Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, what does the scenario look like in the event that there's difficulty on behalf of the developer to get the bonds? Can you give us a little bit better idea of like what that process looks like and what delays and what those scenarios would look like for the city?
Sure, and Tyler maybe jump in, but Tyler with Evergreen is he is working with his bond counsel to see what capacity they have today for bonds based on what is currently committed for the site, and it's not much. So that's really the issue here. If we don't get the infrastructure done, that is going to probably delay the time that it takes to get tenants signed up and the ability of the district to issue bonds. So it kind of goes hand in hand. But Tyler, are you on there still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me participate today. You know, right now where we sit with our current debt capacity for the district based upon our construction of the multifamily project, and then, you know, we've got our transaction closed with, you know, Come and Go gas stations. They got their SDP approved and closed actually last week, which is great. And then our upcoming transaction with Foothills Credit Union, you know, that very limited amount of activity only generates, you know, debt capacity of about $3 million. And that's obviously insufficient for us to do, you know, much with the hook ramps. And frankly, with the way the hook ramp reimbursement agreement is established between Longs Peak and the city, technically there's other entities that have first priority on those funds. But the bottom line is, as we said today, there's current there's not enough capacity to satisfy the other obligations of the district and to pay the city. What we really need are large sales tax generating users. And I'm so frustrated by this whole situation because, we had active negotiations with 3 different anchor tenants for Clear Creek that were looking very strong, before COVID hit. All 3 of those groups still are interested in moving forward, but as you can imagine, they've got their focus elsewhere at the moment with the current crisis. So we're very hopeful that once the storm passes, that our sales tax generating users that will allow us to do a significant bond issuance to repay the city for it fronting these additional dollars. But right now, it's hard for us to exactly predict where when that will occur. If you would have asked me this 90 days ago, we were planning on issuing bonds by the end of 2020, and it was going to be a short throw between the city fronting some of this additional money, over $10 million, and us reimbursing the city. And in fact, we believed at that point that the city would actually never fully fund the balance of the project because the flyover bridge, won't be complete till next summer. So we thought that we'd be able to replace the city's cash kind of midway through. But right now we can't, and it's in everyone's, I think, financial best interest to keep the train on the tracks. And so we're grateful that city staff came up with this creative solution that will allow us to keep that moving forward until such time, hopefully in 2021, where we'll be in a position to issue that debt in a significant manner that will allow us to repay the city.
Thank you. And then my second question maybe is for either Patrick or Mr. Dahl. To swap out the funds from the designated TOD improvements to this, what action, is that just something that you have the authority to do, Patrick, or is that something that needs to go through a process?
No, the funds are already all allocated in the 2E budget, and right now they're split up between the 4 different projects based on what we thought we would need in this year. So it would basically just be a transfer, administrative transfer in the budget itself. And that's all it takes, really.
Thank you.
Additional questions from council? Ms. Dozeman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Patrick, when do you expect us to get some projections as to like how badly we were hit by all of this as far as financially goes?
We have some numbers from April, and April was better than we expected. I think we were looking at closer to a 50% decrease, and I think it was only somewhere between 20 and 30. We don't have May, of course, yet, and we think May is going to be worse. But I've been seeing a lot of activity out and about recently. People shopping. I know it's not going to be back to normal for some time, but it is going to be a month-to-month analysis, Ms. Dozeman, to determine what those revenues are going to look like. But we are looking at that monthly, and I can tell you that April was better than we expected. That's all we have right now.
So when did we start seeing or expecting this to be an issue as far as completing the hook ramps and needing to divert funds from other 2E projects?
The last several weeks, we've been talking about it. Mainly the issue really hit us when COVID started. Again, as I mentioned before, we were hoping to be able to cash flow this using general fund reserves and other budget money. But once we started analyzing the impacts of COVID on the city's budget, we realized we're not going to have the money to cash flow this project. And if the Wadsworth project comes in higher than expected too, we may have some issues there. So just in the last few weeks, we've been, as I mentioned earlier, we've been having many different discussions to figure out how to move forward. And we had meetings with CDOT in the last couple of weeks. And I think we got them on board potentially to, if we had to, postpone the project. But as I mentioned, then we finally got numbers on what it would cost the city, throwaway money, basically of $1.3 million. if the project was delayed, because we have contractual obligations with Mortensen. And if they have to demobilize, there's clauses in the contracts that they get paid damages.
So my only concern is that we have been anticipating this somewhat, and the voters voted on these specific projects, and there doesn't seem to be a solid timeline as to when this money would be paid back. And the delays to the TOD project, that's kind of up in the air as well. And I mean, what projects will this directly impact at the TOD site?
Primarily, probably the construction of the pedestrian bridge, which is a good chunk of $5 million. But as I mentioned, that's not fully designed yet. So we have enough funds to finish the design. That's going to take several months anyway. Construction probably wouldn't start on that until next year anyway. So a lot of things are going to move forward with TOD. Maybe a couple of the road projects may get delayed also, but we have enough funding to finish all the design work for the projects at the TOD station. It's just when they get finished we don't have an actual date on that yet.
What is the projected timeline now of the hook ramps being completed?
If we continue moving forward now, they'd be finished next summer. So about a year, I think. 12 months or 18 months, Tyler? It's about 12 months still?
Yeah, it's about 12 months. Next June is the scheduled completion date of the flyover bridge, and then the final, connections of ramps B and C.
So, I mean, that's another good point, Ms. Dozman, that, we'll be cash flowing the rest of the hook ramp project for over a 12-month period. So we don't have to give Evergreen, the district, or the contractor the $7 million or $7.5 million tomorrow. We'll be paying this monthly. And, a lot of things could change over the 12 months, and we may have more revenues. We may get federal funding that could be for some of these projects, and which we could put right back into the TOD project.
And so this doesn't need to come to a formal vote. We don't need to be discussing this at a regular business meeting or anything.
No,
It's
it's really just a timing issue of when a couple projects get done. As I mentioned, we had long discussions with bond counsel, and they said, no, this is totally fine. You're meeting the intent of the bond ordinance and the ballot question. It's just the timing of when all the projects get done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions, Ms. Hoppy?
Because this is something that, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Because this is something that, is where we are kind of paying on a monthly basis, and we don't have to, put the whole $7.5 million out right off the bat. Then at some point down the road, if our general budget becomes a little more flush, then we could, do that transfer back over to it sooner than maybe perhaps the bonds getting done. Is that right?
Exactly. Yep.
And then, I just want to say I support doing this because, a pedestrian bridge at the TOD site is a pedestrian bridge to nowhere right now, where if we can get these hook ramps, we can get some larger, some more of the retail and entertainment stuff signed up in there, then they can get their bonds faster. And so I think it's important for us to support this project in this way.
Thank you. Additional questions? Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess, first of all, I'm trying to figure out we received this email last night at 6 p.m. and we're now discussing this under city managers matters. Why wasn't this an item on the agenda or further information provided sooner rather than later? Now we have less than 24 hours to kind of mull this over.
Well, we, and Janice could maybe speak to this too. We purposely, we were potentially thinking about canceling the study session because we didn't have any items, and we got Denver Water to do their presentation, but Janice wanted to keep this meeting scheduled in case we had last minute items. And this really came together at the last minute, this option of using the bond funds. We didn't get clarification from our bond attorneys and until the last couple of days, and we didn't have time to get it out in the packet. So I just wanted to make sure to use tonight to give you an update. But yeah, that was why we didn't know when the packet was going out, which direction we were going.
I just want to preface this by saying that I fully support this project and our desire to utilize the 2E bond funds for this purpose. But as Janice pointed out, the pedestrian bridge at the TOD site could be a bridge to nowhere. But in this instance, in the absolute worst case scenario that we're seeing here, if the bonds are not issued for the Clear Creek crossing, these will be hook ramps to nowhere. Is that, in an absolute worst case scenario, is that what we're looking at?
Well, I wouldn't say to nowhere. There's Tyler Evergreen's under contract with Lutheran Hospital to build, a $60 million medical campus. We have 300 residential units under contract, which are going in. I think they still have a contract or close to a contract with a hotel. The Come and Go, the Foothills Credit Union corporate office. So there, it would definitely be hook ramps to those things. But yeah, I can't guarantee that, COVID goes on for another 5 years and delays this project. I can't guarantee that that's not going to happen. But
yeah, I don't think any of us are in a position to prognosticate where this is going or how this is going to happen. But when we're asked to consider where to put the money, that puts us in a position of having to make predictions. And so I understand that.
Councilman Urban, may I chime in for a minute?
Go ahead.
What I can tell you is before COVID and in our negotiations with the 3 anchor tenants, and they're not 3 mutually exclusive anchors, they would be 3 co-locating anchors. The first question I got out of everyone's mouth was, when will the highway project be done? Because it's of paramount importance to those guys. You're getting the street grid in and the ramps flowing and even the flyover bridge. All of that was helping with the marketability of the site. And so I think just self-interestedly from the district side, we're anxious to have the highway project completed as soon as it can. It's had plenty of delays to date because of challenges with Denver Water, which I think you guys are very aware of. But now that we're so close, what we want to do is continue to set the table so that when these different anchor tenants are ready to make deals, that the schedule hasn't changed. And yes, it's still going to be open. And that's what everyone was frankly looking forward to, was getting deals under contract and approved through Wheat Ridge in 2020, and then starting construction in 21, so that by the time they opened, all the ramps were rocking and rolling. So I think it will be a benefit. And I think it also will help the traffic in the area. If we were in this hypothetical situation to suspend the project and put it on delay, what that would mean is that ramp C would never be reconstructed or reopened, and all on-ramp traffic would flow through ramp B for a longer than anticipated period of time. And that wasn't ideal either. There's a reason why in the ultimate design that everyone was planning on building, having 2 on-ramps to I-70 westbound. So anyways, I hope that may be helpful a little bit.
That does help. And I understand the concept of setting the table here, and the ability to issue bonds will be a greater likelihood if these hook ramps are in place. And it makes sense that we would move forward with that, because without the hook ramps and without the progress on the highway, it makes it more difficult to sign leases. So I understand the bet, but I just want to understand the worst case scenario as well. So setting that aside, looking at the TOD site, as we consider the various 2E funds, Anderson Park's already done, and as we're looking at what the Wadsworth widening project, given the direct impact that's going to have on businesses along Wadsworth, has there been any contemplation about putting the Wadsworth widening on hold because of COVID-19, and then an additional 2 or 3 year of economic impact to those businesses as well, and what that would do to the city coffers? Or what can we do to consider the financial impact that would have on the city?
I don't know if there would be enough. We've already spent some of the 7 million that was allocated towards the Wadsworth project. So I don't have that number with me in front of me tonight, but I don't know if there would be enough to backfill the gap for the hook ramp project. And you know, if we delay that, we are under a schedule to for the federal funding to have the project out to bid by October of this year. And if we don't, we could potentially lose the federal funding, all the federal funding for that project. So it wouldn't just probably put it on hold, it would probably kill the entire project.
Okay, and I guess the overarching concern I have there is going back to, we've closed down businesses for several months now, and then no less than 12 months later, we're going to be closing them down again intermittently, and that's going to impact sales tax revenue as well. So what kind of, and then at the same time, we're talking about eminent domain issues and purchasing properties at a time when their business revenues are down, and that could affect the appraisals that they have. So I see a number of issues there. And has there been any discussions about the impact of COVID-19 on the Wadsworth Winding project at all?
Not specifically in those details, Mr. Urban. The project is at this point still moving forward. We purchased the two properties that were full takes, the Midas and the Raleigh Bertos. We came into agreements with those. The rest of the right of way are smaller pieces up and down Wadsworth. The final designs are being done, and it's scheduled to go out to bid probably in September.
Okay, so setting that aside, I would be in favor of the plan that's been presented so far to allow the TOD funds to be utilized for this, and then it be repaid back, and see where it goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions? Ms. Hulteen?
Actually, Councilwoman Hoppy had her hand up before mine.
Yes, she did. Thank you so much, Ms. Hoppy, and then Ms. Hulteen.
Thanks. I just wanted to say to what Patrick was saying about the meeting, just real fast. So because we've had several times, and since we've gone to the virtual meetings of several people adding things to the agenda kind of last minute, that's why I wanted to keep this, even though Denver Water came on time. I just wanted to keep this meeting open because we don't have a meeting next week, which is a 5th Monday. So, and I know that a lot of things are changing in our environment quickly. So, you know, we may have some meetings in the future also that don't have a lot of things on the agenda, but it's there so that we have an availability in case something like this comes up. So.
Thank you, Ms. Hulteen, and then Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 2 questions. Well, first of all, before my questions, I do support this. I think it's a prudent, way of addressing the situation that we're all in. By swapping these funds out per the 2E timeline that's set out, how long would we have as a city to get the funds back in place to complete the TOD projects that were promised to the voters?
There's really no restrictions under legal restrictions. I think it's more of a public trust and maybe political. We definitely, and I had that conversation with Tyler. I said, we can't drag out the TOD project for years. So I asked him to do everything he can to make sure that, as he mentioned earlier, he's got a waterfall structure on who gets paid back first. And I said, please do what you can do to make sure that we get paid back as soon as possible so that we can continue the TOD projects. We did, when we issued the bonds, I had to sign a document that said we would make our best faith efforts to spend 85% of the funds in 3 years. 3 years is this May 7th, I believe. Or no, we passed, I think. Let's see, are we 3 years? 17, 18, 19? Yeah, we're on our 3 years. So we've spent a good chunk of it, but it's not an IRS issue or a bond ordinance issue, and it's just a good faith. A COVID pandemic is a good enough reason that to delay some of the projects.
Okay, and I think actually I'm going to pass on my other question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. The $1.3 million, is that just in the contract, is that just a penalty or is that actual cost?
Yeah, it's broken up about, and Tyler might be able to speak to this. I can't remember how it's broken up, but part of it is they need to, if we wanted to suspend the Hook Grant project, they would have to demobilize the site and put it in a condition that it can sit for a while and finish some, I believe, some landscaping, some electrical and some different things, utility work. A portion of the 1.3 would go towards that. So that wouldn't necessarily be a throwaway. The rest is a damage cost, that contractual damage, yeah, for basically for profits for the contractor that, you know, we pulled out of a contract and they are eligible for those damages.
Do we have any of those type of penalties with anything at the TOD site or anything with Wadsworth or anything like that?
Not with the TOD site. Fortunately, we're not under contract for any construction. We are under contracts for some design work, which again we are moving forward with. With Wadsworth, the only issue, the only hook is with the federal funding through DRCOG. That if we don't get this out to bid by a certain date, they could pull the federal funding.
Thank you. I just want to say I think I support this as well as we move forward. I think it's prudent to make sure it gets done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, Mr. Goff, did you have any other items tonight?
We do. We have several. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us.
I believe Karen O'Donnell, is Karen O'Donnell on the line?
She is.
We, last week, there was a couple comments from council members to ask us to look into potentially utilizing our parks for some private use for some of our businesses, since they can't open their gyms or because of the public health orders. So Karen had been working on that already, and she just has an update on that real quick.
All right, Ms. O'Donnell.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. So we don't typically allow use of parks for commercial purposes, but as I mentioned in the last update, we think it's important to be a good neighbor during this time, and we don't want to see any Wheat Ridge businesses fail. So we're looking at primarily recreation-related businesses that reside in Wheat Ridge, but looking at allowing free use for a limited time only and being very clear about that there will be an end date for that. And we'll keep an eye on the governor's orders to determine when that end date is, based on when businesses can begin to reopen with some normalcy. So currently people can just call the recreation center, and our facility coordinator, Clarissa, is managing this program, and they just need to fill out a park and trail special use permit. And our city programs will have priority, but if there's availability, we will certainly approve any qualifying organizations. And let's see, currently under the state orders, classes can only be held with 4 people, and that includes the instructor. So I don't know how much this is going to help at this point, but we anticipate additional updates. I believe it's May 25th or 26th from the governor. So hopefully those numbers will be increased, and then this can be something that people can take advantage of. When approving these permits, I'm just going to add some specific guidelines. There's a place where I can write in some information before I approve. And it's just going to include the expectation that the permit holder will follow state and local guidelines, that it's for a limited time only, and we'll give at least 2 weeks notice to folks, so it's not just going to be an abrupt ending to this program. Again, currently it's for groups of 4, and there's under current orders, there's no shared equipment. And then the only other thing I'm just putting in there is just a recommendation that in lieu of a fee, that we're recommending a small cleanup project, because what our park staff has noticed is that our parks are have way more trash than usual. So they're spending a lot of time with that. So we thought that that would be a good idea, since we're not charging a fee for this, to just have a little 5-minute cleanup project with the participants in your class to give back. So that's really all I have on that. I don't know if anybody has questions, but Patrick, I also have the update on the Greenbelt, if you want me to mention that.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Let me go with any questions from Ms. O'Donnell on that issue. Then go ahead with your other update, Ms.
I think Rachel had a question.
Oh, Rachel, I'm sorry. Mr. Hand, please, this whole team.
Thank you, Mayor. Karen, I just want to thank you for acting quickly on that. I realize at this point with only 4 people, we might not have that many takers, but maybe with the updated information from the county, you know, if those numbers get bigger, I think it'll make a huge difference. And so I just really want to thank you and your department. You demonstrated to us a couple of weeks ago how many moving pieces you guys are taking on right now. And I just want to thank you for taking this one on and doing it really professionally and effectively. And I'm sure we'll have several businesses in our community who will benefit greatly, as well as community members who can participate. So with much gratitude, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions right now? Okay, now Ms. O'Donnell, you may go to your next item.
Just wanted to give you a quick update because we talked about the Greenbelt bike and trail safety a couple of weeks ago, and wanted to give you some information. Both Sarah Spalding and Jesse have been, well, they updated an existing PSA on trail safety. It was keeping dogs on leashes, picking up after your dogs, and they updated the video to include masks. So they did a fantastic job. It's awesome. So that will be available. And then also, our plan internally was to create and purchase some temporary signage to where there's like a sign and then you go 20 feet and there's another sign and another sign with just little snippets of information along the greenbelt going in both directions. And by random coincidence, I was able to acquire signs that were exactly what I had in mind in my head through the state's bike, pedestrian, and byways section. Through CDOT, they had a grant and they were offering these free to communities. And it just, I looked at them and I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we wanted. So I'm just waiting on the delivery, but they're free of charge. We get 2 sets. And I actually can share the screen if you'd like and show you what they look like because they're pretty cool.
Great.
So we have Be Kind, Share the Trail. Masks aren't just for Halloween. I thought that one was cute. Be Aware, Free One Ear. So again, like when you're walking on the trail, just making sure your earbuds, one of them's out so you can hear when people are approaching. Use the bell, please call your pass. So that, again, reminding people to say, you know, on your left. And then the one that kind of started this whole conversation, bikes yield to peds limit 15 miles per hour. So, and all of these signs show masks on the cartoon people as well, which I thought was kind of fun. I really think it kind of meets the intent of what we wanted to do. So, so I was pretty excited to find that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. That's very good.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. Any questions for Ms. O'Donnell? Mr. Stites and then Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, Ms. O'Donnell, I had a question from your presentation last week. I had a couple of constituents reach out. They were asking about the gold panning and playgrounds. When were we planning to open those up, or is that just not going to happen at all?
Well, the playgrounds are under the current state order. So until we get additional direction from the governor, the playgrounds are closed. The gold panning, it came from the Jefferson County Sheriff, and then we kind of extended that to Wheat Ridge. It was all about the Clear Creek and not having activity in the creek so that emergency personnel didn't have to make any rescues if something were to happen. So that's the intent behind that. But I don't have any update on that. But as soon as I do, I will definitely let you know. But we have reopened tennis courts for singles play. And then tomorrow we'll open basketball courts for groups of 4 or less, and the skate park.
Thank you.
People are using the skate park anyway, if you haven't noticed.
We've heard.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the trail signs, are those able to be co-branded, or those remain just the CDOT ones?
They're not, yeah, because they're already made and they're just going to ship them to us. So
I think they look great. That was my only question.
Do you want us to throw a
sticker
on
yeah,
or
we
something?
could probably put a sticker on it.
Well, you'll be the first ones to put the stickers on them, and doesn't.
That's true. Better not.
Okay.
Thanks, Karen.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. O'Donnell, for that update, and thanks to your department for doing great work for our citizens, because we have a great park system. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks. Okay, Mr. Goff. Mr. Goff, any more tonight?
Couple more, just real short.
Okay.
I'll keep it going.
Okay.
Another item that was brought up last week also was working with our local businesses, mainly restaurants and taverns and bars, to allow them to expand to the outdoor spaces, which has, there's been some guidance received both from the county health department and the state health department. And of course, our staff was working on that already, which was great. We're planning to release those guidance documents. We have a one-pager that staff has put together this week to our business community. Essentially, we're allowing outdoor operations such as patios and retail space, temporary tents, conversion of parking areas for businesses, so that when we're still under this safer at home order, they can expand their operations so that they can space people out and hopefully have more customers. So a small group of staff has been working on this, and I think Mr. Dahl hopefully is on the line. And to do this, it's going to require some flexibility in our code, and Mr. Dahl has drafted up an executive order to allow us to do that. And Mr. Dahl, are you still on?
Yes, I am. Can Allie put me on?
Okay. Can you speak to that a little bit? Whoop, did I lose you?
He was here. There he is.
He's back now.
Okay. Mr. Dahl, could you speak to the executive order and what that would do?
Let me unmute. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yep. Well, as council recalls, you did pass a resolution that grants the city manager a fair amount of authority to waive and modify rules and to make the kinds of rules and guidelines that just have to happen on a kind of a quick basis. So what I have done is taken the handout that the staff has put together on the subject of use of public property or outdoor use, modification of premises for liquor license licensees to modify their premises, and also some building code kinds of requirements, mostly to allow for building permits to be acquired for these same purposes electronically or by email, and put those into an executive order that the city manager could sign, similar to the short-term order that was out there on masks, as you recall. But remember, that resolution the council passed granted fairly broad authority, and this is exactly the kind of topic that you need that authority for. The draft order that I put together that the manager and I and the staff are looking at attaches the guidance from the staff. It's kind of written in language that the business community can kind of understand and apply. Attaches that guidance and says that rules may be waived up to the level of that guidance, but not more. Requires that the applicants understand that if there's a violation, their ability to have the waiver can be terminated, as a time frame for how long this would last, and generally relies on the guidance the staff has put together and makes that enforceable. Also relies on the department heads largely to administer this. And that's really up to Mr. Goff, but you'd want, for example, a community development director to be the one in the initial instance to make a decision about whether the waiver was appropriate for a given business in a given fact situation. We're in a spot where you can't write specific rules right this minute for a pizza place versus the coffee shop next door. You need to be able to have the director of community development make those adjustments up to the maximum limits allowed in the guidance. Any appeals or disputes and property owners or business owners disagreeing with an order or decision the director would make would go to the city manager. You'd have the final decision. That'd be the final decision of the city. You need to have these things really prompt, and all of those appeals, et cetera, would be by email. So trying to make it as streamlined as possible. Got the waiver ability and the ability to loosen up on some regulations in 3 different categories. up to that limit, and the ability to act rather quickly. Those were the kind of the guidelines that or the pole stars, if you will, that I tried to think about when I did the order to make it fast, applicable, business friendly, and with the ability of the manager to react and his staff to react quickly and make adjustments as we do things.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, and the whole goal is to be as flexible as possible for our business community, but also making sure that public safety is still a factor. Staff worked with both fire departments to make sure that they're on board with some of these changes. And we also had a small focus group with, I think, 3 or 4 different businesses that may take advantage of this to ask them what would work for them. And so we learned a lot from that. We're also looking at potentially, there's probably quite a bit of an expense for some restaurants to get tents and chairs and tables and such. So we are looking at the possibility of the city or economic development program renting tents that businesses could use. I think some of that could be reimbursed by some of our CARES Act funding. But again, we're trying to provide as many opportunities for our business community to open and be in business under these safer at home orders. And I think Steve Kirkpatrick and Robin were involved in these discussions too on the liquor side. I'm not sure if Steve, if you have anything to add to that.
No, there's still all sorts of questions about how to implement, for instance, allowing people to sell liquor and deliver it on a patio or in a parking lot. And the guidance is coming out from the Department of Revenue, from the liquor enforcement people on exactly how to do that. So the state is well aware that they're going to need to issue some special regulations to make sure restaurants can do this, maintain their liquor license integrity, and open as quickly as possible.
You're waiting for that. You're waiting for those regulations to come down now?
Some of them already have. Some came down as recently as today. And city clerks, town clerks, county clerks all across the state are asking more detailed questions. There is actually a town hall meeting tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Patrick?
I think so, yeah.
That with the liquor enforcement people are going to walk us through FAQs and how to handle situations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that, Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a great idea about the tents. And is there any consideration regarding the tents, whether these would be gifted to the property owners or would they be rented from the city? And is there any liability with those tents being owned by the city and rent or used by property owners?
Yeah, good questions. And honestly, Mr. Urban, we just thought of the tents today. Local Works made some calls and got some pricing on rentals if we couldn't purchase them. And I have an email from our insurance company too on those questions about liability. I haven't read it yet. I just got it this afternoon, but we're checking on the liability on that too, to make sure that we're covered. Or do the businesses have to get additional liability coverage, or do they have to name the city as an additional insured to make sure that the city's not liable? So we're looking at all those issues. We haven't talked about gifting tents, but if that's something council wants to look at, I don't honestly know what the costs are of purchasing a new tent. I think renting them is, I think, very feasible with, especially if we can use CARES Act funding to reimburse us for that.
And then in addition to that, when we were talking about converting parking spaces to dining areas, does the city have any jersey barriers or other barriers that could be utilized for that? Or you could rent those from a traffic control company of some kind? Or
yeah, that's a good question. We may have some, Mr. Urban, but yeah, we could look at renting too. If that works for a business, a jersey barrier, that might be a good idea.
And just I'm assuming the Community Development Department will look at a plan that's being presented and consider those elements as it relates to keeping the traffic away from the patio area, if it will. And a Jersey barrier does a pretty good job at keeping cars away. So
Yeah, part of the process, Mr. Urban, is they would have to submit a little diagram of where their tents are going to be and different things to make sure that they're meeting all the safety precautions.
Okay. Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Goff. What's your next item?
Council retreat. To be or not to be? I sent you an email too this weekend. I recommend that we wait till the first of maybe next year and reevaluate. We're going day by day here, I think, trying to provide a base level of services to our community. And I think we're still doing a great job, but things are changing monthly. And I just think it's better that we have some more time to maybe get through this and have a clearer picture, potentially, hopefully by the beginning of next year, of what the future looks like before we sit down in a retreat format and spend time on that. So that's my recommendation. Just want to check in on what everybody is thinking.
Discussion on that, thumbs? Ms. Hulteen? Ms. Hulteen has her hand up, not her thumb.
Well, my thumb and my four fingers. Thank you.
In conjunction of, with.
So my thumbs are up on that postponement. Two thoughts on that. One is because we have so many new council members, could we, in lieu of a retreat, have a review of the strategic priorities that are in place and sort of how those are being impacted? So just because I think it would be helpful for us to at least be in alignment with, understanding what that working framework is and, how it's being impacted. So at least we're on the same page as we go into the budget season.
No, thank you. Yeah, very good point, Ms. Hulteen. And we were all teed up, ready to do that on March 15th. I think that's study session. And, so we have an update, and so we probably got to look at it again and see if there's any changes. But I think we could bring that to a study session in the next several weeks and just give you a good update on where we are on all that.
I think that would be really helpful. And then my second would be to move our retreat to earlier in the year than we were looking at. So I know that there are a lot of moving pieces around there, but I think we're going to have a unique landscape early next year. And I think giving everyone a little bit more time to have that retreat and sort of digest the outcomes of that, I think would be beneficial to all. So I'd like to propose we look at moving it forward a little bit in the year.
Maybe after the first of the year.
Like first quarter, Rachel? Is that
sort of first quarter, I think, don't you think?
Yep.
Okay.
Last item?
COVID, yep.
Mask order that expires at the end of the month. What would you like to do? I think Denver, was it Denver, or they just extended theirs to June 15th or 16th? Any thoughts on that?
Ms. Hoppy?
I'm in favor of extending it.
Additional discussion? Ms. Dozman?
Yeah, so since Dr. Mark Johnson had spoke at our study session and said that that Jefferson County wasn't going to be implementing such an order because the science was pretty much out and wasn't definitive either way of whether it helped or even hurt. And I think a lot of businesses, like major businesses like Costco and King Soopers, have already implemented orders on their own for their personal businesses. I don't see any point in extending it beyond the 30th, and I definitely don't think that if we let short-term rentals expire and people travel into our community and let that restriction lapse, I don't see any point in allowing for the mask order to continue beyond the 30th.
Mr. Stites?
Sorry, I couldn't get the mute button off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to agree with Ms. Dozman. I think that we should let it expire. I think that it did its purpose. I think that it put the seriousness of how we view how serious that is into the community. But I do think that most businesses are now implementing their own mask orders the way that they feel that they need to. And I think kind of as government, we need to step back and let people make their decisions for themselves and let the businesses take care of it. So thank you.
Ms. Weaver?
I am with Ms. Hoppy on this. I feel like we should continue it. I think it's the one thing that we have in our control as far as the spread of this is our own personal, not spreading it to others and not getting it from others. And so I would support continuing it. Thanks.
Additional discussion, Ms. Dozeman?
So, I've kind of grappled with this back and forth, and I asked, what was the original intent of the stay-at-home orders and now the safer-at-home orders? And it was to flatten the curve so as to not overwhelm our healthcare system. Now we've got a better grasp as to how to treat this. We have flattened the curve and actually seen, a reduction. And now we're looking at how COVID deaths are being reported from the CDC and the state. And I definitely don't see any benefits from imposing these mask orders on businesses that are already struggling. And I think it really is coming down to personal responsibility for individuals and businesses. And this is really being drawn out beyond what the original intent was. And I understand that, we're still at risk. COVID-19 is a real thing. It's out there. People are getting sick. There are people dying. So it's not like it's imaginary, but I also think that we've come to a place where the cure of the policies that we're putting in place are becoming much worse than the actual cause. And we are seeing it crippling our economy. We're seeing a lot of backlash and a lot of, whether we want to consider it inconveniences or civil liberties. I mean, there is a real thing about, what is the role and purpose of government in all of this. And I think that, especially for all of us who, sorry about that, especially for all of us, for me, I think it's really hard for us as Wheat Ridge City Council to have implemented a restriction on short-term rentals that are not regulated and per our staff are considered to be prohibited because our charter is silent on the issue. We lifted those restrictions because of the impact on businesses, and we didn't want to prevent travelers and people coming into our community, and yet we're going to impose regulations for masks on our community. I think that there's a lot of I see a lot of issues with that.
Ms. Nosler-Back?
Just to go back to the last conversation we had about the ordinance, we removed it as a ordinance that caused any kind of, punitive impact if you didn't want to wear a mask. It was that we were encouraging people to volunteer to wear a mask. And that's what, when we edited the ordinance, we took some of the stringent component of that off of what we put together, and it became more of a message that we wanted to make sure everybody knew that we were gonna play it safe here in Wheat Ridge. And so I'm fully in support of continuing that amended ordinance that we pushed forward.
Mr. Stites, and then Mr. Urban.
I guess my question is, how long do we continue to push it out and out and out and out? And it's difficult because we did have the head doctor in Jeffco here a couple weeks ago who said that they weren't going to push it because the science is 50-50 on it. So, at what point are we holding back what needs to happen eventually anyway, is that people need to get out in the community, start developing. I don't want to be the scientist, I'm not the scientist, but younger people do need to get this eventually. So at what point do we get into July, August, September, and we've held back on anybody getting it, or Are we just holding back a dam? Sorry, I'm just trying to kind of reason, when will we stop if we continue it now? So will it be July? Will it be June 15th? Is it data driven, and what data are we using to decide?
Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So when this mask order was first considered, I was the one that brought up the concern about putting a time limit in place for the very reason that we're having this discussion here, is that no one wants to be left holding the bag or feel responsible for someone becoming infected by this terrible disease. And to Councilmember Steitz's point regarding when would we lift it, that's a very difficult question to answer. No one wants to say that they're the ones that are lifting it, because then that indicates that we're responsible for someone getting affected because we don't have the mask order in place. And so I would be in favor of ending the resolution that we passed. It was not an ordinance, so it's a resolution that we passed. We can continue to encourage folks to use common sense and wear a mask. We're not telling people that they can't wear a mask, except for that there is a concern that's been raised by the Colorado Bankers Association regarding their inability to adhere to the mask order because of concerns regarding banking customers' access to their funds, banking customers entering into a banking lobby with a mask on. And so that is at least one industry that we've heard from explicitly saying that the mask order we have in place will not work for them, and they're looking to open their lobbies here shortly. So aside from our concerns regarding the science behind the masks, there are legitimate concerns posed by at least the Colorado Bankers Association regarding this going forward. So I would be in favor of allowing it to end as we stated, which was a 30-day window. And this also could be the eye of the storm. We could be going back into a situation in the fall where we have to require it again. And so by adhering to that 30-day time frame and lifting it now, it gives our residents the understanding that we're doing as best we can with the information that we have available, and that we may ask them to reinstitute it in the future. But for now, they should use their own common sense and their own desires as to whether they want to wear one or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchinson, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you.
Please go ahead. And then Ms. Dozman.
I am in favor of extending wearing the mask. What I have seen when it is allowed where people can get together in groups, it ends up there's no social distancing. Okay. I mean, they're crammed together. They're not wearing masks. We have no idea what this is. It changes every week or every day almost. And when I see, when I look up Jefferson County information about nursing homes and the number of workers who are getting COVID, and there's no visitors that are going into nursing homes. So how are the people in the nursing homes getting this COVID? From the workers? Then they go home and, not all of them are able to stay in a trailer or have a short-term rental or anything like that. We don't know what this is. And it's about public health and safety. So if people choose to, they want to get all together, and that's what they do. I mean, you're not supposed to be, more than 10 people. They don't abide by it. We're supposed to not have more than 4. We'll see how it goes on the basketball courts and things like that. You just have to, we just are in an unknown situation right now. And I just feel it's the best for public safety to recommend wearing masks. And I even know that, people still walking around, they get closer than 6 feet or whatever. So I just don't want to get it myself. And so I don't want anybody else to get it. So I just feel it's a very smart thing to do. And I think we need to be smart. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Ms. Dozman and then Ms. Hoppy.
So it really comes down to what is the point of wearing masks? And I feel like the director of Jefferson County Public Health was pretty clear in our study session about the science not being definitive behind masks. And if they really did work in preventing the spread, like we seem to be holding to the flame tonight, it would make sense for everybody to wear them and everything just reopen. If they worked in preventing the spread of the illness to the effect of us putting it in a policy, then why couldn't we just wear masks and have kept everything open? So and as far as removing the punitive part, like there again, what's the point then? It's just a suggestion at that rate. And there's a lot of mixed messaging because it was an order by Patrick, by Mr. Goff, our city manager, and the messaging about it being a misdemeanor and that getting out to the public by waves of news coverage, and that kind of being the consistent message there for a while until we passed the resolution. And so now I think a lot of people are confused as to whether it's mandated and required and there's going to be something punitive taken against them if they don't wear it versus whether it's a voluntary compliance. So I think the way we handled this from the get-go was kind of messy, and now we're looking to extend it, even though Jefferson County and Dr. Johnson is clearly more of an expert on all of this than I am. And so for him to say that they're not going to implement it because there's no way to know what one way or the other whether it's effective, like I think that we should definitely take the county's lead and not extend the mask order.
Ms. Hoppy?
Dr. Johnson also said that he highly recommends it. And so, and I do think that, the messages got cleared up and we have supplied masks for those businesses. But, I'm just going to try to put out a consensus out there and, consent or don't consent to your choice. But I'm going to say, I'd like to ask for a consensus to extend our mask order to June 15th to coincide with Denver's current mask order.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5 hands for that motion. So I assume we have 3 on the other side.
Mayor, question.
Yeah, yes, sir.
From just a procedural standpoint, you do not have another meeting in May. It expires May the 30th. Tonight's a consensus, of course, isn't enough to pass a resolution because that has to be done at a regular or special council meeting. So to continue the order in one way or another, you have, I think, really only 2 choices. One is to call a special meeting, and we'll put an ordinance or a resolution on the agenda to extend the resolution that you passed, to resolution number 26. Door number 2 is, by consensus, you certainly can direct the city manager to do what you did originally. When you think about it, the first order on this was issued by the manager under his authority in that resolution. That was the basis for him issuing that first order, and he'd be able to do that. He'd be able to issue an order that is similar to or the same as the resolution 26 that's in place for the up to June 15th. Now, obviously, first meeting in June, you could revisit that just as you did when you revisited the manager's mask order about a week after it was in place. But what can't happen is a extension of the resolution tonight, because the resolution expires May 30th and can only be extended in a regular or special meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. So we will have a study session, our next study session on June the 1st, and then our next business meeting on June the 8th.
And so I do think, if the study session is June the 1st, conceivably you could plug a special meeting in on that same date, and then you've got a meeting, and there's at most a 24-hour gap. But I see Councilmember Hoppy has got her hand up, and I'm interrupting, so I'll mute.
Ms. Hoppy?
Schedule wise, we could we could add a special meeting to the end of that study session. It's not very big right now. Or I could just change my consensus and ask for a consensus to extend the mask order to June 15th via the city manager through his charge that he is allowed to do through the emergency management order.
Well, you can do one or the other.
I'll ask for a consensus to have the city manager do it through the emergency management order through June 15th. I'll ask for that consensus.
Okay. All hands in favor of that consensus? That is not a consensus. Mr. Stites, you had your hand up?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think that the executive order or the city manager's order was part of the problem the first time. I think a lot of people, and maybe it was just the misdemeanor part, but a lot of people kind of felt like that was an overstep. And I know he's got emergency powers, but something like this really should be passed through council, I think. That's just my opinion.
Would we, Ms. Noslerbeck and then Ms. Holteen?
I just wanted to chime in that I'm in full support of moving this resolution forward, but I just don't want to end up in the same situation that we were in before, where Patrick was taking all the flack for it.
Ms. Holteen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think given that we're a relatively split council on this issue, my preference would be for us to add the special meeting on June 1st and allow our community to provide input. I think, what we need to, a couple of us on businesses, but I think it's a tricky issue. And I mean, I support extending it. I know for me, it's made a difference when I walk in and I see most people in the store, like almost everybody wearing a mask. I feel more comfortable. I went to a local garden center on Sunday and the owner and employees were not wearing masks, and I turned around and walked right out again. So it does impact business practices. And I think I would feel more comfortable if we actually did it as somewhat of a policy process and did a special meeting and allowed input from both business members and community members, so that I would feel more comfortable with that type of input moving forward. Thank you.
Ms. Hobby?
Rachel, why don't you ask for a consensus for that?
Okay. I'd like to put forward a consensus to hold a special city council meeting on June 1st to address, I guess at that point it would be renewing the requirement for masks in businesses through June 15th.
Raise your hand if you favor a consensus to hold a meeting on the 1st of June to discuss this issue. We do have consensus on that. I think we need to have, I'll be honest with you, I think we need to have this discussion. I own a restaurant, and, the governor talked today about talking about restaurants opening. I don't foresee any of my patrons, and I'm a critical business, eating with their mask on. So I don't know what that says, but but unless we have edible masks, and I don't know if we'll be able to introduce those in our restaurant, in a certain flavor, but if we could, we would. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be back in our seats at 10 minutes until 9. we will continue our meeting. So Mr. Goff, you're done?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That'll finish the second item on our agenda. We will go to item number 3, elected officials reports. If you have a report to give, please raise your hand. Mr. Kirkpatrick.
I just wanted to wish Mr. Dahl a happy birthday tomorrow.
Oh.
And it is one of those birthdays that ends in a 0. He will be old enough to vote.
Moving into that 9th decade, Mr. Dahl.
But you know, you promised, Mr. Kirkpatrick, you promised not to reveal. No reveal.
I know nothing.
We'll let people guess which one that is. My mother always said the ones that end in 0 are the hard ones. And I didn't understand that when I was 30. As the years went by, I a couple decades went by and I went, oh, I get it now. So,
well, it's good that you can remember back that far.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkpatrick.
You're welcome.
Okay, additional elected officials reports. Mr. Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Dahl, I had a question for you. I saw on, I think it was 9 News this weekend, that the governor was putting out an order as far as collections of petitions and signatures and things like that being done online. Do you know anything about that? And does that pertain to us at all as far as what we're trying to do?
Yeah, I do. And I appreciate your asking a question. As I assured the council last meeting, I was going to stay on top of the dynamics around petition circulation. And I have been doing that. The governor's order was directed the Secretary of State to develop emergency regulations around, especially around the circulation of petitions, to potentially allow petition signature by email, by regular mail, and the Secretary of State's busily doing that. It's really clear, however, the governor's order only applies to state level petitions. The governor doesn't have authority to legislate for local governments. Only the city council has that. However, as a result of that order and the Supreme Court decision I informed the council about last meeting, I've developed a memo which is in almost final draft. And now is probably a good time to tell you I will send that memo out because I've gotten the Supreme Court's decision, the governor's order. I've networked this with the city attorneys, and so I'm ready to kind of advise you. I'll give you the highlights, which are twofold. On the issues on the things that are in the charter, 45 days and 10% of the votes cast in the last gubernatorial election have to sign. That's immutable. That's in the charter. Of course, can't be amended by the council. Charter, however, and your home rule authority allows you to implement provisions of the charter around initiative and referendum. Wheat Ridge hasn't done that and has defaulted to the statutes, as many home rule cities do. You're in good company. But there are home rule cities that and other cities that have enacted in the charter, and the Constitution actually allows you to enact ordinances to implement the charter provisions. And so it would be within your power to enact an ordinance governing how petitions are circulated, not how many signatures, not when the signatures have to be collected in 45 days, but procedures for circulation, not unlike what you're seeing the governor and the Secretary of State engaging in. I'll send out the memo, but I'll tell you the memo also says that when you do one thing around petition circulation, you have to watch out about what else it affects. Statutes on petition circulation are kind of a web and a whole system. So for example, I'll shut up in a minute, but for example, they require an affidavit of a circulator. Well, if petitions can be emailed in, what happens to the circulator? Why do you have a circulator? You have a circulator to assure the city clerk, in this case, that the signatures are affixed in the presence of the person, that they are, in fact, the signature of the person saying who they are. You know, it's kind of a little like a notary. You know, there's security involved. Now, you have the power by ordinance to change that. But when you change one aspect, you have to think about the other kind of protections that are built into the initiative referendum statutes and make sure that doing one thing doesn't undo some things that are unintended. Definitely have the power, but it's unusual circumstance, of course. But you would be able to exercise the power. You'd have to do it by ordinance to preempt the state statutes, which presently apply because you don't have any local rules, and impose your own on a given set of subjects. And the ones I know that council's most interested in is the logistics of petition circulation during COVID, and should we lighten up on that? Clearly, the governor and the secretary of state are working on that for state level petitions. You have the right to do it locally. I would expect, I'll get the memo out, and I would expect that at some point you'll give me direction about whether you want me to put together more than just the few, not really suggestions, but guideposts that I've given you in the memo. And that memo is basically ready to go. So your question was timely, and I'm glad I worked on the memo today, so I was ready for the question.
Additional public elected officials reports. Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most of you have seen probably on Facebook, I'm sad to report that the Carnation Festival this August 15th, 16th, and 17th, I believe, has officially been canceled. Our chair, Joe DeMott, sent out a message to all of our board members and also posted on our Facebook page. I know we've had some requests is to have something, at least something, but unfortunately there's so much planning and contractual obligations that go with the Carnation Festival that it wouldn't have been responsible to spend that kind of money and have it potentially be canceled in August. We're still seeing a lot of restrictions on large groups and gatherings, meeting, and I don't foresee that changing come August, unfortunately. So we hope to be back bigger and better than ever for our 52nd annual celebration, and hope that you can all support us in that, and also, of course, come and celebrate our great city of Wheat Ridge. So I'm sorry to pass that on, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dozman. Ms. Poppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say thank you to to Councilmember Dozman and Joe DeMott and everybody that's on their board. I know that was a super hard decision, and I guess I just have to say I'm thankful we were able to have the one on the 50th anniversary, which was good. And I'm just really sorry. I know you guys put so much time into that, and I know it's a real disappointment for you and for everybody. So, but thank you so much for all the time you guys put into that.
Thank you. Additional elected officials reports. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Business Stabilization Task Force met last week. We went through the existing application and made a few minor changes to the application. There's a couple things. I had received a call from a landlord who classified herself as a sole proprietor, and the task force determined that looks more like an investment than it does a small business. And so in those types of situations, we won't be considering an application from somebody that doesn't have an actual retail storefront in a commercial or industrial zone district. There are other resources and solutions out there for landlords, and various mortgage companies are working on forbearances and the like. So we're directing those individuals to those resources. But at this time, the current round of funding just doesn't seem to fit with that fact pattern. So they decided not to do that. That also includes that no home-based businesses are eligible under this second round as well. We will be allowing franchisees that have less than 25 employees apply for funding, and we're going to be working through looking at the applications from franchisees to see if there's any additional restrictions we need to place on that. But for right now, we will be allowing franchisees to apply and they will be eligible. Additional question that we added to the application is, what have you done to support or encourage the community in the past 12 months? It isn't a make or break question, but it is a question that we felt like it would be appropriate to ask in the situation where we had a tie-breaking situation in trying to determine who to give funds to and who not to. But that was one question that was added. The language around the public health order was added to the disclaimer in the application, so they have to agree to it by, adhere to the public health orders. And we worked with Jerry Dahl to get that figured out. And then in addition to that, we kept the language around remaining in good standing with the city, but we didn't add any other jurisdictions to that. So we're not asking them to be in good standing with the county, the state, the feds. It's not really our sphere of influence, and we don't really feel like it's on our position to determine whether someone's in good standing with another governmental body. We just can only say what they're in good standing are, how well they're in good standing with us. And so we're not really concerning ourselves with other issues they may have outstanding with other jurisdictions. The application should be available midweek. I don't want to put a particular date and time on it, but look out for it to come out midweek, and we will have it available until, I believe, June 5th, and then we'll be making decisions and awarding grants by June 11th, which is about 30 days from when council allocated these funds. So that's our current timeline, and depending on the number of applications and the length of time it takes for the task force to go through them, that timeline might change, but that's the estimated timeline that we have right now. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Ms. Weaver, it looks like she has a question. Do you have a question?
I just wanted to thank Mr. Urban for dealing with the sole proprietor question and just going through that exercise. I just appreciate you dealing with, I think several of us got a call from different constituents around that topic, and I just appreciate your time. I know you spent a lot of time around all of this already, but I just really appreciate your taking the time to sort of check in with each type of business as to what can be done and other resources that they might be able to find. So thanks for your time towards that.
Yeah. Thank you. Additional elected officials reports. Ms. Holteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Between now and when we meet again, Jefferson County Public Schools will be ending the school year. And I know it's a little bit of a mixed bag on what that means for people since the students have been home. But I do know that it means we will have a lot more kids out walking and riding their bikes during the middle of the day. So just want to remind everyone to drive safely and carefully in our neighborhoods. And there's going to be a lot more visible kids out and about, and we want them to be able to enjoy that.
Thank you. Any additional elected officials reports? Well, I don't see any, so I would like to thank all of you for being here tonight. Thank you for good conversation. I'd like to thank our guests from Denver Water, Ms. Shaw, Ms. Woodrow, and Ms. Truby for giving us the download on their lead remediation efforts. I hope this is, lead is, as you know, a really critical public health issue, and I'm glad that they are addressing this on a proactive basis. And I hope that if any of our citizens out there have questions, they will contact Denver Water. And if they don't get any answers, then please call the city and we will try to help get information. I want to give a shout out once again to the graduating class of 2020. It's been obviously a difficult time to graduate in a very unusual circumstance, but you've achieved a great deal in graduating from high school, and you've got a great future in front of you. So congratulations and really great success in whatever road you go down in the future. So with that, if there's no more business to come to council, we will stand adjourned. Next week is Memorial Day, so I hope everyone has a good holiday, and we will plan to convene again on June the 1st. So thank you very much, and we are adjourned.